There's a belief that Hamas's leader might be dead. There's even more fire being exchanged in Lebanon, and Israeli forces are drawing condemnation for raiding the West Bank offices of Al Jazeera. Starting with Lebanon, the health ministry there says that Israeli strikes this morning killed at least 182 people and wounded hundreds more. Although as of filming, we don't know how many were civilians and how many were combatants. But that said, these strikes were extensive, and Israel admitted to launching at least 300 across southern Lebanon. Following this, Israel also warned that further strikes were likely going to be hitting the eastern part of the country and warned locals to flee, many of which have. Also warning locals to flee any area where Hezbollah weapons could be kept, and even provided a map. Which, I mean, you probably notice that the map just includes pretty much all of eastern Lebanon, something that human rights advocates have slammed, with them pointing out that it's not a civilian's responsibility to know where military objectives are, so just blanket saying everywhere in this area isn't super helpful. Also with this, over in Beirut, families are rushing to pull their kids from school despite not being targeted at the time, though that wasn't unreasonable because just as I started recording this, Beirut was hit with strikes. And this after just 2 days ago, Israel bombed the southern portion of the city when trying to hit a Hezbollah commander. And so today's strikes, alongside the recent pager and walkie-talkie explosions, that is being argued by some as an Israeli strategy to escalate the situation in order to de-escalate. And whatever your feelings on if that makes sense or not, for the time being, it does not seem to be working. Right? In response to pretty much every attack, including today's, Hezbollah has fired off its own missiles and drones into Israel. Although notably, their strikes have been far less effective, possibly because much of the border region has already been evacuated by Israel. So the even bigger concern right now is that all of this is going to lead to an all-out war between the two sides rather than calm things down, which also may be the Israeli government's intention anyways. With it being argued that they might think that it's better to get this over with now while their military is mobilized rather than wait for Hezbollah to get more powerful. And in fact, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made comments to this effect, saying that the country was, quote, not waiting for the threat to come, we're preempting it. But all of that, I mean, that's just what's happening up north. On pretty much every border, Israel has stuff going on. Right? Over in Gaza, officials say that an Israeli strike hit a school 2 days ago and killed 22. However, here you had Israel pushing back on the idea that it was a school, claiming that it was just to cover for a Hamas command center. Also, speaking of Hamas command, there were rumors circulating that Israel managed to kill Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar, after he was suspiciously silent and unreachable for a while. And the IDF refused to confirm or deny that, but now there are reports coming out that they've recovered bodies to DNA test and the results were negative. So it looks that Sinwar might still be alive, though this is all still developing. But then, as far as other updates, shifting gears and going to the West Bank, Israel raided the offices of Al Jazeera in the city of Ramallah, where according to a security guard on duty, my eyes were heavy and I was almost asleep when I suddenly saw them breaking the main door. I stood up to see what they were doing. They threw the first bomb and then the second. And after breaching the building, Israeli soldiers spread out to shut down the facility and confiscate materials. And one of the big things with all this is that Al Jazeera actually live streamed the entire thing. You also had Israel ordering that Al Jazeera couldn't use the space and would be banned from broadcasting there for 45 days, and they made sure of both. Or with the offices getting their doors torn out and replaced with iron ones. Though really, it was more of an iron wall than a door, considering they were welded shut. And this raid, I mean, it's a major hit to Al Jazeera's operations throughout Palestine, since Ramallah was its last big office in the area after its Jerusalem location was similarly raided back in May. And each time we've seen Israel justify their actions by saying that the offices were used to incite terror, support terrorist activities, and used as a mouthpiece for Israel's enemies. Now with that, both accusations were heavily denied by Al Jazeera, who called the raids a criminal act and added, the raid on the office and seizure of our equipment is not only an attack on Al Jazeera, but an affront to press freedom and the very principles of journalism. With it also being backed up by journalist groups from Israel, such as the Foreign Press Association, right, as their name suggests, they represent foreign press in the region, and they said in a statement that they were deeply troubled by an escalation which threatens press freedom. But for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens on pretty much every front. I mean, there is a lot going on right now and a lot developing in real time. And we'll continue to aim to try to cover as much as possible, right? Because the headline grabbing war events, they often hide the other activities that would normally be massive headlines on their own.